25 states in the U.S. have passed legislation to legalize medical marijuana. The majority of those states have legalized cannabis for medicinal purposes. However, recreational marijuana use is fully legal in Alaska, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, and the District of Columbia. What is Utah's stance, and where do you stand on the issue of legalized marijuana? The cannabis debate: should medical marijuana be legalized? Linda Black.
Can you help me with this? Over here.
Oh, sure.
I'll be behind it.
Okay.
So, thank you, because I got my hands full.
Linda, before you get started, I'll give you the regular brief for the 3 to 5 minutes, and then when you tell me your Q&A, I'll reset.
3, 4, 5. Yes, thank you. That would be helpful. Appreciate that. Okay. Fellow Utahns, welcome. It's our privilege in a week to be voters in America. We get to vote for our president, vice president. We're a free nation. And as Patrick pointed out in his eloquent speech on where that freedom comes from and liberty, I feel it's an honor and a privilege as an American to be able to vote next week. One thing that's going to be left out on our voters registration or our vote ballot this year for Utahns will be the right to decide for our state whether or not marijuana should be legalized. It is not going to be found on the ballot this year. I want to tell you a few reasons why medical marijuana may be in our future and might be a good thing for us all the way around. So what is marijuana? Oh. There's a debate over the efficacy of cannabis. Cannabis is the plant that is marijuana, the leaf, and it includes the leaf and the flower, the seeds, the dried seeds, and cannabis sativa. And it has a mind-altering chemical in it called delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC for short. There's over 400 constituents in the plant. 60 are similar, so about 60 that they can tell apart from each other. There's strong support for its viability as an alternate choice for the FDA-approved drugs, as we'll see. So what are the benefits to the use of marijuana as a medical alternative? Well, there's a lot of things that ail us as Americans. We have pain, joint pain, arthritic pain, back pain, and after you have surgery, pain relief will be prescribed to you, often in the way of Oxycontin derivative pain relievers. These are highly addictive. An alternative for that would be the use of marijuana. And in this study, which you can't really see that orange because I couldn't tell if you could see it or not. It looks great on my screen. In studies done on all of these different conditions, so I'll just read them: ALS, bipolar disorder, cancer, general use, glaucoma, HIV, Huntington's disease, Crohn's, multiple sclerosis, nausea, pain. Raise your hand if any of you have experienced any of this. Parkinson's, or know somebody, right? Okay, so all of these were candidates for the use of NSAIDs, which is just over-the-counter anti-inflammatory drugs, and or pain relief. And of the studies done with using marijuana, you can see in that first column, the pros, there's 41%, or 68% of them were pro the use of marijuana. The cons, 5 of the studies showed no difference or there was no benefit in using the marijuana. So a little less than 9% of that. And then there were some that were not clearly pro or con. That's just one study. Oops, there we go. Here we go. So what are the concerns? Well, we've heard it could be a gateway drug. That's true when you start with a younger crowd. So when it gets in the hands of kids who are using it for recreational use, this can be a hazard or a problem, and it can have long-term effects. There's the toxicity of the smoke, which is similar to that of the lungs, the smoke in the tar or nicotine, the tar in smokers. But generally, the short-term effects subside if it's used irregularly or not at a young age. Okay? So this chart just shows right here, you can see the cannabis is right kind of in the middle. These are the blue is harm to self, and the red is harm to others by its use. Not deaths, but just harm. So you can see, I'm clicking the wrong one. I did what you did. Okay, right here, cannabis is clearly well below what alcohol, the alcohol in our states and society. Moving on. So let's look at the deaths from marijuana. There's 17 FDA-approved drugs for pain relief. So what do you think would be the difference in the death toll using marijuana versus the 17 FDA drugs? Some of you might know the answer to this. We'll just look here. These are the drug classifications for the different elements, specific drugs for categories. And in this sense, not necessarily for pain, but for things like vomiting, nausea, muscle spasms, psychosis, replacement for Xanax, which is very prevalent in our society, antidepressants. The death, as you can see, for most of these are right here, 8th in this category here. Well, in this, right here, 0 for marijuana, 196, 118, and the total, some death toll, and the winner is total deaths from 17 FDA-approved drugs, 10,000 versus the 0 from marijuana. Quite a difference, yes. So there is a case for the use of it. This is other annual causes of death, and if you look in the far column, and this is really tiny, there's, you can see the very last one, cannabis, marijuana here, 0 deaths. And this is a span from all causes. This is from 1997, I want to say, to 2005, so total number for a span of years. And if you add them all up, this is quite a large number. It's over close to 3 million, 2.5 million deaths from all of the other causes. Diabetes, Alzheimer's. So there's no known, it can be a secondary cause often, but not a primary cause of death. In other words, it's really hard to overdose on the smoking marijuana. There's other things that obviously are not good for your health, but it doesn't induce death. Pharmaceutical opioids, which is the really big debate. Opioids are highly addictive, as I mentioned before. In this case, a heroin overdoses, pharmaceutical opioids, total close to 50,000, and that's in 1 year, in 2014. Drug-induced deaths. So what is the solution? Well, you can see alcohol, 1.8 million, cigarettes, pharmaceuticals, and here's cannabis. You do the math. Should we legalize marijuana? And I'm opening for your discussion here. Questions, concerns? Yes?
You mentioned that it could be the cause of secondary deaths. What would be an example of a secondary death caused by?
So there's a chart on the secondary deaths caused from it playing a part in the death. So it might be that alcohol was also involved, and then when they took blood tests of somebody in a car crash, they may have had marijuana in their bloodstream, but it wasn't the cause of the death. It might have been the car crash that caused it. It might have been the alcohol involvement. So that's the same thing too with alcohol. So you'd get a study, somebody dies of a car crash, but the alcohol and the marijuana may have been involved. So that would be an example of a secondary, which is much, much less than alcohol.
So what's interesting about the charts that you shared is they're raw numbers, right? They're just numbers. What about statistically use of those numbers? And the reason the question's asked is because, yes, we know alcoholism causes a lot of deaths. That's why it
Yes.
could be regulated per se. So the question that comes is statistically, there's going to be more people that take antidepressants. You know, they're legal. State of Utah knows a great consumer of them. The downside of that is that as a percentage, we don't know where that falls.
That's
You know,
that's a
and
very
then-
good question.
And then the last slide showed
Let me address
global deaths, if I could, to stand on.
Yes, yes.
Said global deaths associated to marijuana is 0. How can we be sure that number is accurate when we have a hard time even collecting U.S. statistics on products like this?
So the sites that I'm showing you these charts from come from the National Disease Institute. I should get this right. Yeah, the CDC, and there's another site too that I should probably have right at my fingertips for you. Now, worldwide, there are 3.8% of the population uses marijuana. That's 1 in 26. So one of us here might use marijuana. 1 in 26 is a large number of people, a large group in marijuana. People are raising their hands. You don't have to raise your hand. So there is a lot of data out now about the causes of death of marijuana. That doesn't include the cartel, deaths caused by monitoring the drug use and selling it on the corner, and people, getting killed because they're drug lords and all of that.
That's irrelevant to the conversation, really, right? I mean, the conversation
To the medical,
is,
yes.
Because really, the biggest concern I have of it is, if we're wanting to push it FDA approved, which I don't know if alcohol is or is not, right? Because it's a medical use. I don't know any doctors that prescribe
Alcohol is-
alcohol for medical use.
Correct.
So it is what it is, same with cigarettes. But if it's for a medical use debate,
But if we look at the pharmaceutical, there's a large number of deaths that happen every year. 100,000 deaths a year just on opioids. Over 100,000 deaths per year for prescription drugs that are misused.
sure.
And there is no deaths associated with the use of cannabis. And it has been widely used since 1985 for medicinal purposes, just not legalized in the US. And there are studies and sites talking about that.
Sure.
We're out of time for questions, but the debate remains, and I appreciate your time and consideration in looking at the different facets of medical marijuana.